Do you know what true betrayal feels like? I didn't, until my own daughter-in-law tossed my suitcase onto the curb and told me, "This is not your home anymore, Janet. Find somewhere else to grow old." I never imagined that after 50 years of building a life, I'd be standing in the drizzle on Sycamore Lane, clutching a frayed duffel bag, while neighbors pretended not to stare and my family acted like I'd already died. If you've ever felt abandoned by the people you loved most, or watched your whole world vanish in a single afternoon, then my story will break your heart, and maybe give you hope. If you're listening, please subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, or share your own story. I read every word and I want to know I'm not alone. It was late October, and the leaves were falling in great rust-colored piles along the street. My fingers shook as I tried to zip my coat, not sure if the cold was coming from the autumn wind or the pit that had opened up inside me. The house behind me, 2416 Sycamore Lane, wasn't just any house. It was the place where I'd cooked every Sunday dinner, where my children learned to walk, where I held my husband's hand as he took his last breath. Now the door was slammed shut, and Emma, my daughter-in-law, stood on the porch with her arms folded tight, her eyes dry and merciless. "You can't mean this," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. Emma didn't even look at me, just checked her phone and said, "I gave you until noon, Janet. It's almost 1. She wore one of those expensive sky blue athleisure sets that always seemed out of place in our old house. I wanted to scream, to plead, to fall to my knees and beg her to let me stay. But I just stood there, silent, feeling every memory of this place slip through my fingers. My son, Daniel, wasn't home. He was on a business trip in Seattle, or so Emma said. I'd barely spoken to him since the funeral last month. My granddaughter, Chloe, who used to braid my hair and call me Grandma Jan, came out dragging my favorite wool blanket. "Where should I put this, Mom?" Chloe asked, not even glancing at me. "Just put it with the rest of her stuff," Emma replied, waving toward a pile near the trash cans. My knees buckled. That blanket had covered 3 generations of our family, from my own mother's house to my grandchildren's sleepovers. Now it was just one more piece of trash. The neighbors noticed. I could see Mrs. Riley peeking out from behind her lace curtains, probably whispering to her husband, "Did you hear? Janet's family finally kicked her out." No one offered help. No one asked if I had somewhere to go. I was invisible, a ghost in the only world I'd ever known. I'd spent 47 years in that house, making pot roast for Sunday dinners, scrubbing muddy footprints out of the carpet, singing lullabies in the middle of the night. I nursed my husband, Michael, through a decade of heart trouble. I watched over Daniel through college, then his first broken engagement, then finally his marriage to Emma. I thought I'd earned my place here. But as Emma started giving orders to the movers, I realized how quickly your life can be erased. All it takes is a single moment of weakness, a single greedy heart, and suddenly you're just in the way. I tried to appeal to Chloe, hoping some trace of our bond was left. "Honey, please bring me the photo album from the living room. The one with your baby pictures," I called. Chloe hesitated. Emma shot her a look. "We don't have space for all that old stuff. Just put it in the giveaway box." My hands shook as I realized how little I had left. One suitcase, an old blanket, and memories nobody wanted. "Emma, please," I begged one last time, "just give me until Daniel comes home. He'd never want me out on the street." Emma's eyes turned to ice. "Daniel trusts me to do what's right for this family. You should have planned better, Janet. You're 68. You need to learn how to stand on your own." The movers loaded my belongings into a van, not caring that the chipped tea set once belonged to my grandmother, or that the rocking chair was where I cradled Daniel to sleep during his night terrors. I watched my life disappear in boxes, and nobody said a word. It started to rain, a soft, miserable drizzle, and I realized I had nowhere to go, nobody left to call. All those years of sacrifice, all the birthdays, the anniversaries, the silent prayers when Michael was in the hospital, and now I was just a problem to be solved. Emma came down the steps, handed me a business card with an address scribbled on the back. "There's a room at the Maplewood Inn," she said. "I prepaid 2 nights. After that, you'll need to figure something out. And Janet, don't come around the house. Chloe needs stability. She doesn't need drama." The door slammed behind her. The street was empty. The rain fell harder. I dragged my suitcase to the curb and sat on the cold stone wall, my head spinning with shame and disbelief. I wanted to scream. I wanted to wake up from this nightmare and find Michael sitting at the kitchen table, reading the sports page and laughing about how stubborn Emma could be. Instead, I was 68 years old, homeless, with less than $200 in my wallet and nowhere to turn. If you've ever been in a place like this, lost, betrayed, thrown away by your own family, I hope my story helps you feel less alone. Please subscribe, share this video, and tell me your story in the comments. The world needs to hear us, because we are not invisible. And you won't believe what happened next. The Maplewood Inn looked nothing like the cozy place the name promised. It was a faded 2-story building on the edge of town, with flickering neon lights and a peeling sign that read, "Vacancy." As I dragged my suitcase through the drizzle, I could smell cigarette smoke mixed with the sour scent of old carpet and fried food from the diner next door. The woman at the front desk barely looked up as I handed her Emma's prepaid receipt. "Room 12. End of the hall." "No smoking," she said, sliding a scuffed key across the counter. There was no smile, no welcome, just the tired resignation of someone who'd seen too many lost souls wash up here. The room was small and cold. There was a single narrow bed, a dresser with a missing drawer, and faded curtains that barely kept out the yellow glare of the parking lot lights. I set my suitcase on the floor and sank onto the edge of the mattress, staring at the threadbare carpet and trying to steady my breathing. For a long time, I just sat there, too numb to cry, too tired to be angry. I'd imagined growing old in my home, baking cookies for my grandkids, tending the backyard roses, watching reruns with Michael's memory beside me. Now I was staring at the cracked ceiling of a motel room, trying to remember who I even was without all those things. I couldn't sleep that first night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma's cold stare, Chloe's averted gaze, the front door slamming shut. I listened to the hum of traffic on the road outside, the occasional laughter from the parking lot, the creak of footsteps in the hallway. I wanted to believe this was all a mistake, that Daniel would call any minute and demand to know where his mother was, that Chloe would sneak out to find me and say she was sorry. But the hours ticked by, and my phone stayed silent. I was completely, terrifyingly alone. The next morning, I dressed in the only clean clothes I had, gray slacks and a faded pink sweater, the kind of thing Michael used to say made me look as soft as spring. I combed my hair in the warped bathroom mirror and tried to summon the courage to call Daniel. My hands shook as I dialed his number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I tried again, and again, but there was no answer. I left a message, my voice trembling. "Daniel, it's Mom. I just want to talk. Please call me when you can." I waited all day, carrying my phone everywhere, but he never called back. With nothing else to do, I walked down the block to the diner. It was a greasy spoon called Sally's Place, the kind of spot with cracked red vinyl booths and photos of long-gone regulars taped to the walls. I ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a cup of coffee and dry toast. The waitress, a middle-aged woman named Linda, eyed me curiously. "New in town?" she asked as she poured my coffee. "Something like that," I replied. She gave a sympathetic smile, the kind that says she's seen plenty of stories like mine but knows better than to ask. "If you need work, check the notice board by the door," she said quietly before moving on to the next table. I glanced at the board on my way out. Most of the postings were for yard work, babysitting, or cleaning jobs. I scribbled down a number for a housekeeping position at the Greenway Apartments, not really believing anyone would hire a 68-year-old woman with nothing but a high school diploma and a lifetime of cooking, cleaning, and mothering behind her. Still, it was better than sitting in my motel room, counting the hours until my money ran out. That afternoon, I walked back to Sycamore Lane. I kept to the far side of the street, my head down, my heart pounding in my chest. The house looked the same from a distance: red brick, white shutters, a maple tree out front whose leaves blazed gold in the autumn sun. But everything felt different. Through the window, I could see Emma in the kitchen, laughing on her phone, looking every inch the lady of the house. Chloe was sitting at the table, scrolling through her tablet, her long hair falling over her face. For a moment, I almost walked up the front steps, desperate for any scrap of normalcy, but I stopped myself. I was a stranger here now, unwelcome and unseen. As I turned to go, Mrs. Riley came out of her house, carrying a basket of laundry. She spotted me and hesitated. For a moment I thought she might come over, offer some comfort or at least a kind word. Instead, she nodded stiffly and hurried inside. The world keeps turning, even when your own life grinds to a halt. That night, back in my motel room, I pulled out my old leather wallet and counted the bills inside. $183.72. That was all I had left after paying for groceries and the motel room. My hands shook as I did the math, enough for maybe another week or two, if I skipped meals and prayed nothing else went wrong. I thought about calling Emma, asking for help, begging for a few more days in the house, but I knew what she would say. "You need to stand on your own, Janet. You're not our responsibility." The next morning, I walked to the Greenway Apartments for the housekeeping job interview. The manager, a brisk woman named Ms. Carr, barely glanced at my resume. "You ever clean up after kids, fix a leaky faucet, deal with late rent?" she asked. I nodded, thinking of a lifetime of patching, scrubbing, and stretching every penny. She looked at me, her lips pursed. "You'll start tomorrow. $7 an hour, under the table. Don't be late." I thanked her, forcing a smile, and walked back to the motel feeling a strange flicker of pride. For the first time in years, I was going to earn my own way. That night, I lay in the lumpy bed and thought about Michael. I could almost hear his voice, gentle and steady, telling me to hang on, that things would get better. I wanted to believe him. But as the neon lights flickered outside my window and the world spun on without me, I wasn't sure what I believed anymore. Morning sunlight crept through the thin motel curtains, painting the small room in pale gold. My first shift at the Greenway Apartments started at 8, but I woke long before dawn, nerves crackling in my chest. I splashed cold water on my face and tried to smooth my hair, wishing for my old vanity mirror and Michael's teasing voice behind me. Instead, there was only the silence of the motel and my reflection, older and more tired than I remembered. The walk to Greenway was brisk, the air biting with a November chill. My stomach churned from hunger. I'd skipped dinner the night before to stretch what little money I had. When I arrived, Ms. Carr was waiting with a ring of keys and a long list of chores. "Start with the laundry room. Then Building B needs bathrooms cleaned. We're showing units today, so make sure the windows are spotless," she barked, thrusting a mop into my hands. "No, good morning, no, thank you. Just work." By noon, my back ached and my hands were raw from scrubbing floors and hauling bags of linens. But as I wiped down a row of plastic chairs in the common room, I found myself humming. There was something oddly grounding about honest labor, even when it left me exhausted. When I was a young mother, I'd prided myself on keeping a tidy house, folding Daniel's socks into neat pairs, ironing Michael's shirts crisp as hotel linen. For the first time since losing my home, I felt a flicker of dignity. The tenants, mostly single parents and retirees, drifted in and out. Most ignored me, but one elderly man with thick glasses smiled and handed me a wrapped candy. "Thank you for making the place smell nice, miss," he said, his voice trembling. I tucked the sweet into my pocket, the small kindness warming me far more than the radiator in the hallway. When my shift ended, Ms. Carr handed me $35 in crumpled bills. "You did good. Come back tomorrow," she grunted. I nodded, clutching the money like a lifeline. I could afford groceries now, maybe even a real meal at the diner if I stretched it. My feet hurt, but I walked home a little taller, my shoulders squared against the wind. At the motel, Linda the waitress greeted me as I passed by Sally's place. "Rough day?" she asked, pushing a mug of coffee toward me. "First day on the job," I admitted. She slid a plate of meatloaf and mashed potatoes across the counter. "On the house," she said softly. "Everyone needs a break sometimes." Tears stung my eyes at her kindness, but I forced a smile. "Thank you, Linda. You don't know what this means." We sat together in companionable silence, her presence a balm against the ache of loneliness. As I ate, I realized I hadn't spoken to anyone, really spoken, in days. "You got family around here?" Linda asked. The question caught me off guard. I swallowed hard, then shook my head. "Not anymore," I managed. She squeezed my hand briefly, not asking for details. "Well, you got friends now. Diner folks always stick together." After dinner, I walked the few blocks back to the Maplewood Inn, carrying a paper bag with half the meatloaf for breakfast. The wind whipped through the trees, carrying the smell of distant rain and burning leaves. I found myself thinking of Chloe, how she used to collect autumn leaves and press them into her scrapbook, how she'd laugh as we made leaf crowns on the porch. My heart twisted with longing, but I pushed the memories aside. That was another life. Back in my room, I dialed Daniel's number once more. This time, it rang only once before going to voicemail. I left a short message. "Daniel, I'm okay. I just wanted to hear your voice. I love you." I stared at the phone, willing it to ring, but the silence was absolute. I spent that night writing in a battered notebook I found at the bottom of my suitcase. I wrote about Michael, about the smell of his cologne, the way he used to whistle as he mowed the lawn. I wrote about Chloe's sticky fingers and Daniel's crooked smile, about Christmas mornings and hospital nights and the ordinary miracles of family. Writing made the memories real, proof that I had lived and loved, that I was more than just a shadow haunting a motel room. The next morning brought another round of work, cleaning bathrooms, vacuuming hallways, hauling trash to the curb. My body complained, but my mind grew sharper, steadier with each task. Ms. Carr barked orders, but her tone softened when I scrubbed the windows until they sparkled. "Not bad, Janet," she muttered. "You work harder than most of the kids I've hired." After work, I passed the community center and saw a flyer in the window, "Thanksgiving dinner for seniors, all welcome." My first instinct was to keep walking. I didn't want charity, didn't want to admit how far I'd fallen. But as I thought about spending Thanksgiving alone in my motel room, eating cold meatloaf and watching game shows, something in me cracked. I tore off one of the tabs with the address, folding it into my pocket. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the distant wail of sirens and the hum of the vending machine in the hallway, I made a promise to myself. I would not let this be the end of my story. I had survived worse. I had endured heartbreak and loneliness and loss. I was not done, not yet. If you've ever started over, if you've ever felt like your whole life was being washed away and you had to learn how to swim again, then you know how hard it is to keep going. But you also know there's strength in every step, even the painful ones. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in weeks, I let myself hope it might be something good. Thanksgiving crept up on me faster than I expected. That morning, the sky was slate gray and the air had the bite of winter on its breath. I wrapped myself in my old wool coat, the same coat Daniel once teased me about for being vintage, and walked to the community center 2 blocks from the Maplewood Inn. With every step, I rehearsed excuses in my mind for turning around, for skipping the dinner and spending the holiday alone. But I kept moving, boots crunching over wet leaves, because the alternative was sitting in my motel room and staring at 4 faded walls. The center was already buzzing when I arrived. Long tables covered in paper tablecloths ran the length of the hall, dotted with vases of plastic daisies and plates piled high with turkey, stuffing, and green bean casserole. Volunteers in matching aprons darted between the tables, topping off mugs of cider and doling out slices of pumpkin pie. The smell of roasted meat and sweet spices tugged at some deep memory: my own kitchen, Michael carving the turkey, Chloe perched on a stool and sneaking bits of pie crust. I scanned the crowd, searching for an empty seat that didn't seem too lonely. I finally slid onto the end of a table beside a silver-haired woman in a red scarf. She introduced herself as Margaret, her voice warm and bright. "First Thanksgiving here?" she asked, her eyes twinkling. I nodded, suddenly embarrassed. Margaret smiled and leaned closer. "My family's in Florida. I come here every year. The food's better, and nobody argues about politics." I managed a laugh, my nerves easing a little. For the first time since losing my home, I felt the faintest sense of belonging. As I ate, I listened to the gentle hum of conversation, stories about children and grandchildren, the woes of aging hips, old music drifting from a scratched stereo. It was a chorus of people rebuilding, all of us piecing together our lives in new shapes. When a volunteer named Tom asked for someone to share what they were grateful for, Margaret nudged me. "Go on, Janet. You've got that look in your eye." I shook my head, but suddenly words tumbled out. "I'm grateful for second chances," I said quietly. "I'm grateful for kindness when you least expect it. And I'm grateful to remember that even when you think you've lost everything, you can always find a way to keep going." The table fell silent, then someone began to clap. Warmth rushed through me, and I fought back tears, happy ones, this time. After dinner, as I helped clear plates, Margaret pressed her number into my palm. "If you ever need a ride, or just someone to talk to, call me," she said. I tucked the slip of paper into my coat, surprised at how much that gesture meant. It had been weeks since anyone offered me anything just for the sake of it. That night, I returned to my motel room feeling lighter. I sat on the bed, writing in my notebook, recording the names and stories I'd heard, the taste of spiced cider, the chorus of laughter that echoed long after I left. For a few precious hours, I'd been more than a problem to be solved or a burden to be managed. I'd been a person again, worthy of a seat at the table. The next morning, work at Greenway was tougher than usual. Ms. Carr was in a foul mood, muttering about a leaky roof and tenants who left trash in the hallways. I worked quickly, grateful for the distraction. As I hauled a bag of laundry to the basement, I caught sight of myself in a dusty mirror and barely recognized the determined set of my jaw, the stubborn glint in my eyes. The motel, the loneliness, the hard labor, they hadn't broken me. If anything, they'd begun to carve out something tougher, sharper, inside. During my break, I stepped outside to call Daniel again. This time, the phone rang and rang, until finally I heard his voice, not live, but on voicemail. "Hi, it's Daniel. Leave a message." I hesitated, then spoke. "Daniel, it's Mom. I hope you had a nice Thanksgiving. I miss you. I'm working now, cleaning apartments. I just wanted you to know I'm okay. I love you, honey." I hung up, heart aching with equal parts pride and pain. That evening, back at the motel, I found an envelope slid under my door. My name was written in careful block letters, Janet Carter. I tore it open, heart pounding. Inside was a handwritten note from Linda at Sally's place. Saw a notice: Mabel's Bakery needs extra hands for the holiday rush. You'd be great. Call if you're interested. L. Beneath her note was a phone number and the words, "Ask for Celeste." A spark of hope flickered in my chest. I'd never worked in a bakery before, but I'd baked enough pies and cookies in my life to feed a small army. Maybe I wasn't as useless as Emma claimed. I picked up the phone, dialing the number with trembling hands. After 3 rings, a cheerful voice answered. Mabel's Bakery, Celeste speaking. I introduced myself, mentioning Linda's referral. Celeste laughed, warm and inviting. If you can roll dough and sprinkle cinnamon, you're hired. We need all the help we can get through Christmas. Can you start tomorrow? I agreed before my nerves could catch up to me. When I hung up, I allowed myself a genuine smile. For the first time in weeks, I had not just one job, but 2. Maybe I'd never have my old life back, but I was building something new, piece by fragile piece. I lay in bed that night, watching the lights from passing cars dance across the ceiling. I thought about the strangers who'd become friends, the new skills I was learning, the muscles aching in my arms but the strength blooming in my spirit. I was still grieving, still angry, still wounded. But I was alive. And maybe, just maybe, I was starting to believe in myself again. My first day at Mabel's Bakery felt like stepping into another world. The storefront windows were fogged with the warmth of ovens, and the air inside smelled of cinnamon, yeast, and melting butter. Celeste, the owner, was a whirlwind of flour-dusted aprons and cheerful instructions. Janet, you'll start with the pie crusts. Here, just like you would at home, she grinned, sliding a bowl of dough in my direction. I was nervous, but my hands remembered what my mind had forgotten, how to pinch edges, crimp with a fork, sprinkle sugar just so. The kitchen was alive with energy, bakers humming holiday tunes, customers laughing out front, trays of cookies rotating in and out of the ovens. The pace was fast, but as I lined up trays of apple tarts, something in me thawed. I belonged to this place, if only for a few hours at a time. By noon, Celeste declared me a natural. She winked, handing me a pink box of leftover pastries. Take these home, Janet. Everyone deserves a little sweetness. I walked back to the motel in a haze of sugar and exhaustion, the box warm in my hands. For lunch, I ate a cherry turnover, the flaky crust melting on my tongue, and realized I hadn't felt this kind of quiet happiness in months. At Greenway, work was relentless. Ms. Carr was pleased with my cleaning but rarely showed it. Still, the other staff had started to warm up. Marcus, the maintenance man, showed me how to unclog a sink. A tenant named Rosa pressed a homemade tamale into my palm with a conspiratorial smile. You remind me of my mother, she said quietly, and I found myself blinking back tears. These small acts of kindness, invisible to the outside world, were rebuilding something inside me brick by brick. I saved every dollar I could, buying only what was necessary, a new pair of gloves from the dollar store, a pack of tea bags, an extra bar of soap. In the evenings, I split my time between the bakery and Greenway, my feet aching but my mind sharper than it had been in years. Sometimes, I'd pause outside the diner to wave at Linda or step into the community center to say hello to Margaret. I was weaving myself, slowly and awkwardly, back into the fabric of the world. One afternoon, as I finished cleaning the laundry room, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A message, from Daniel. My heart skipped. I wiped my hands and unlocked the phone, breathless with hope. The text was brief. Hi Mom. Got your message. Busy with work. Hope you're okay. No apology, no promise to call, but it was something. I typed a quick reply, keeping it light. I'm okay, sweetheart. Working 2 jobs. Stay warm out there. I love you. I wanted to say more, to beg for forgiveness, to ask what Emma had told him about my disappearance, to remind him of all the years we'd shared. But I knew too well how quickly need could turn into shame. I pressed send and let it be. A week passed. My days blurred together, early mornings in the bakery rolling dough, afternoons scrubbing apartments, evenings writing in my notebook or sitting in silence with a cup of tea. The money was slowly adding up. I counted my savings each night, careful to hide the cash beneath my mattress. It wasn't much, but it was enough for another week at the motel, maybe a little extra set aside for something better. Then, one Friday, as I was closing up at Mabel's, Celeste handed me a plain white envelope. "You earned this, Janet," she said with a smile. "Holiday bonus for our best new baker." Inside was a crisp $50 bill and a handwritten card. "Thank you for being part of our family this season." I held the card tight, too moved to speak. For the first time since leaving my old home, I felt not just like a survivor, but like someone who could give as well as receive. Later that evening, I walked back to Sycamore Lane. The neighborhood glowed with Christmas lights, every house draped in garlands and twinkling bulbs. I stopped across the street from my old home, just far enough to stay in shadow. Through the front window, I saw Emma stringing lights around the staircase, Chloe curled on the couch, phone in hand. I wondered if Daniel was home, or if he'd left the holidays to Emma like always. For a moment, I was consumed by longing and resentment. I wanted to bang on the door and demand an explanation, to reclaim the space that had been mine for decades. But I didn't move. Instead, I whispered a wish into the cold night air, that Chloe would remember the stories I used to tell her, that Daniel would someday see the truth, that Emma might feel even a flicker of regret. Maybe, one day, they would all know just how much I'd endured. Back at the motel, I curled up under my thrifted blanket, eating another pastry from Celeste's box. Outside, a snowflake drifted past the window, followed by another. Soon the world was soft and white, the ugliness hidden beneath a fresh layer of snow. I closed my eyes and let the sweetness linger, dreaming of a time when I might have a home of my own again. I still missed Michael's steady hand, the way he brushed the snow off my coat and kissed my forehead, the security of his laugh and the gentleness of his love. But I was learning, slowly and painfully, that sometimes you had to become your own shelter. If you're listening to this, if you've ever lost your place in the world and had to build a new one from scratch, I hope you know you're not alone. Every little act of kindness matters. Every day you survive is a triumph. And sometimes, the family you find on the road is stronger than the one you leave behind. December settled over the city like a hush, the streets muffled by new snow and the sky glowing pale and blue in the late afternoons. At Mabel's, holiday orders flooded in: gingerbread, snowflake cookies, fruitcakes wrapped in cellophane. Celeste upped my hours, promising extra cash if I could stay late to help with the Christmas Eve rush. I agreed, grateful for the work and the warmth. The kitchen was bright and alive, flour dust swirling in the light, radio playing carols, and the women swapping recipes and laughter like ornaments. With each passing day, I grew more sure of my hands, faster at braiding challah and rolling dough for pecan pies. I took pride in small things, the golden flake of a perfect croissant, the way the regulars greeted me by name when I boxed their favorite pastries. The staff started calling me Aunt Janet, and for the first time since Michael's funeral, I felt like I belonged somewhere again. Work at Greenway remained gritty, but I tackled each shift with new purpose. Marcus taught me how to snake a drain and patch drywall, joking that, "You're gonna put me out of a job, Janet." Even Ms. Carr seemed less sharp around the edges, once leaving a thermos of coffee for me in the supply closet. "You're the only one who shows up every day," she muttered, not quite meeting my eyes. Money was still tight. The motel ate up most of my pay, and groceries cost more as the holidays neared. I watched every penny, skipping lunch some days to buy small presents for Linda, Margaret, Marcus, and Celeste, a tin of tea, a hand-knit scarf from the thrift store, a box of bakery cookies. I wrapped them myself, using scraps of ribbon and handwritten notes. Giving felt good. It made me feel rich in ways Emma's house never had. Some nights, I allowed myself to remember Christmases past. The smell of pine needles, the hush of snow on the roof, the sound of Daniel's laughter and Michael's baritone singing, "Silent Night," in the living room. I missed the chaos, the arguments, the imperfect joy of a family gathered together. I wondered if Daniel ever thought of me, if Chloe missed our cookie baking afternoons, or if I was just a shadow now, erased by Emma's stories and time. On Christmas Eve, after a 14-hour shift at the bakery, Celeste pressed a red envelope into my hand. "Don't open it until you get home," she said, her eyes bright with mischief. When I got to my motel room, I collapsed onto the bed, too tired to take off my boots. Finally, I peeled open the envelope. Inside was a Christmas card and 2 crisp $100 bills. The note read, "You've saved us more times than you know. Thank you for being our angel this year. Merry Christmas, Aunt Janet, Celeste." Tears came quick and hot, not from sadness but from overwhelming gratitude. I stared at the money, at Celeste's words, and felt a flicker of hope for the first time in a long time. I set aside half for rent, but used the rest to buy a new winter coat the next day, a deep green parka that made my eyes look alive in the thrift store mirror. That night, the city was blanketed in silence. I wrapped myself in my new coat and walked to the community center for the Christmas dinner. Margaret was waiting at the door, waving me over to her table. "There's a seat for you, Janet." "Right next to me," she said, grinning. Dinner was simple, ham and potatoes, green beans and rolls, but it felt like a feast. The volunteers served apple cider and peppermint pie. There was laughter and carols and even a small gift exchange, everyone cheering as the smallest, oldest lady in the room unwrapped a hand-crocheted blanket. For a moment, the ache of what I'd lost faded, replaced by the glow of belonging. Afterward, Margaret drove me back to the motel. As we sat in her car, snow drifting down outside, she reached for my hand. "You're stronger than you think, Janet. I've watched you this fall. You're building a new life, even if you don't see it yet." I squeezed her hand back, too choked up to speak. It was the kindest thing anyone had said to me in years. In my room, I turned on the little radio and listened to carols while I wrapped up the last of my gifts for friends. I allowed myself to imagine what the next year might bring, maybe a place of my own, maybe even a call from Daniel. The world outside was quiet and cold, but inside I was safe, warm, and, for the first time in months, almost at peace. I lay in bed that night and prayed, a quiet, simple prayer, not for things or money or even forgiveness, but for courage and kindness, for the strength to keep moving forward. I knew now that even if I never saw Sycamore Lane again, I could still build a home. Home wasn't a house or a place, but the people you love and the small, brave choices you make each day. If you're listening to my story, and you're alone on a holiday, please remember this: you matter. You belong. And sometimes, the life you rebuild after everything falls apart is more beautiful than anything you could have imagined. The days after Christmas brought a cold so sharp it cut right through my new parka, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and lingers long after you come inside. Work at Mabel's slowed down as the city packed away its decorations and families disappeared back into their routines. Celeste trimmed the hours of her part-timers, but she kept me on for morning shifts, saying she couldn't trust anyone else with the scones. I was grateful for the stability, even if the paychecks shrank. At Greenway, things changed, too. Ms. Carr offered me more responsibility, helping her with paperwork, fielding calls from tenants, even walking through vacant units with prospective renters. "You're organized and you don't miss details," she told me one day, handing over a battered clipboard. "I need someone I can rely on." I accepted without hesitation, determined to prove myself, determined not to be seen as a burden ever again. For the first time since losing my house, I felt something like pride blooming inside me. I had new routines, early mornings rolling out dough, afternoons inspecting apartments, evenings counting tips and jotting notes in my journal. I began to save more of each paycheck, setting aside small bills in an envelope marked "for me." It wasn't much, but the act of saving gave me hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could afford a real apartment before next winter. One afternoon, as I left Greenway, I found a voicemail from Chloe. My breath caught as I listened to her small, uncertain voice. "Hi Grandma, it's me. Mom said you moved away for work. I miss you. I hope you're okay." The message was short, but it hit me harder than any cold wind. I played it again and again, tears slipping down my cheeks, her voice a lifeline I hadn't known I needed. I wanted to call her back, to rush to Sycamore Lane and hold her tight, to bake cookies and tell her stories like old times. But I knew better. If I pushed too hard, Emma would shut the door for good. So I sent Chloe a letter instead, just a simple card with a drawing of a bluebird and a note that read, "I'm thinking of you every single day. I love you so much. Remember, you're braver than you know." I mailed it from the post office down the street, hoping Emma would let her read it, hoping Chloe would know I hadn't forgotten her. January brought icy mornings and long, dark nights. I worked, I saved, I dreamed. Sometimes, on my walks to the bakery, I'd pass the window of a little studio apartment for rent above the hardware store. The sign had been up for weeks: cozy, bright, reasonable rent, inquire inside. Each time I passed, I'd picture myself living there, waking up to sunlight slanting through old windows, putting on a pot of coffee and reading the morning paper in peace. One Friday, Linda from Sally's place found me during my break. "I heard about an opening at the city library," she said, sliding a folded flyer into my hand. "They're looking for part-time help. I know you love books, Janet." I smiled, touched by her thoughtfulness. I'd spent half my life reading bedtime stories to Daniel and then to Chloe, escaping into novels when the world felt too heavy. Maybe working in a library could be another small step toward the future I wanted. The interview was quick, just a short chat with the branch manager, a gentleman named Mr. Lin. He asked about my work experience, then smiled when I spoke of my love for books. "We need someone who can help with inventory, shelve returns, and maybe even read to the kids on Saturdays," he said. "You seem like just the person." I left the library with a hopeful flutter in my chest. 3 jobs, I thought, almost laughing. Who would have guessed I'd be busier now than I'd ever been in my old life? That night, in my tiny motel room, I allowed myself to dream. I wrote out a new budget, crunching numbers, daring to hope. If I kept this up for a few more months, if I could save just a bit more, maybe that studio above the hardware store could be mine. It wouldn't be much, but it would be enough, a place of my own, a fresh start built on the hardest year of my life. Sometimes, when doubt crept in late at night, I'd read the note from Celeste or play Chloe's voicemail again. I'd think of Margaret's hand on mine, Marcus's jokes at Greenway, Linda's quiet support at the diner. These people, none of them blood, had become my family, their kindness filling the empty places that once felt unbearable. As winter dragged on, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't let anger or regret define me. I would build something new, even if I had to do it one small kindness at a time. The world had knocked me down, but it hadn't beaten me. And if there was one thing I'd learned, it was that sometimes the hardest goodbyes lead to the most unexpected beginnings. If you're listening tonight, holding on through your own long winter, remember, it's never too late to start again. Every day is a new chance to rebuild, to reach out, to find your own bright window in the darkness. I haven't found my happy ending yet, but I'm still searching, and I hope you are, too. February arrived with the kind of sleet that makes every sidewalk treacherous and every trip outside feel like a test. I walked carefully, clutching my thrift store boots and green parka tight around me, the cold needling my cheeks. The bakery was quieter after the holidays, but Celeste refused to cut my hours. "You're family now, Janet," she'd say. "Besides, nobody else can make the apple turnovers rise like you." Sometimes we'd work side by side in companionable silence, the kitchen bathed in the golden glow of early morning, the whole city still asleep. I started to look forward to those slow hours, to the warmth of the ovens and Celeste's stories about her kids, her favorite recipes, her plans for summer. The job at the library became a bright spot in my week. Mr. Lin was patient, always ready with a joke or a new mystery novel for me to read. On Saturdays, I found myself sitting in the children's section, a half-circle of little ones sprawled at my feet as I read stories about dragons, brave girls, and magical forests. Their laughter filled the quiet corners of my heart, pushing away the memories of loss that sometimes threatened to take over. Each paycheck, no matter how small, I put a few bills in my "for me" envelope. I tracked every penny in a little notebook: rent, food, bus fare, savings. With 3 jobs, even part-time, my stash was finally growing. The studio above the hardware store was still vacant. I started visiting the landlord, Mr. Reardon, an old gentleman with a silver mustache and a fondness for crossword puzzles. Each week, I'd stop by after work, bringing him a fresh muffin from Mabel's and chatting about the weather, the news, the best paint colors for old wooden floors. I knew he liked me, but I also knew I had to prove I could pay. One afternoon in late February, as the last of the snow melted in dirty heaps along the curb, Mr. Reardon called me into his office. "I've had a few applicants for the apartment," he said, adjusting his glasses. "But I'd rather rent to someone steady, someone who cares about the place." He paused, considering. "If you can give me first month's rent and a small deposit, it's yours, Janet. Move in by the 15th and I'll even have the plumber fix that leaky sink." My hands shook as I thanked him, promising I'd have the money by the end of the week. I left with the key on a string around my neck, hardly believing it was real. Back at the motel, I packed my things with trembling excitement. There wasn't much: 2 suitcases, a box of kitchen utensils, a stack of library books, the green parka, my bakery apron. I left the blanket Linda had given me for the next guest, someone else who might need a piece of comfort. The staff at Greenway and Mabel's insisted on helping. Marcus showed up with an old hand truck. Celeste gave me a basket filled with bread, cookies, and a little basil plant for the windowsill. Margaret and Linda brought cleaning supplies and a second-hand coffee maker. It felt like a parade, like moving into my first dorm all over again, except this time, I was doing it entirely on my own. The studio was small and drafty, with creaky floorboards and a single big window that looked down on Main Street. But it was mine. I scrubbed the walls, dusted the shelves, and arranged my few possessions just so. I stood in the middle of the room, letting the sunlight spill across the faded rug, and felt a strange, almost wild pride. I hadn't just survived, I'd built something new from the wreckage. That evening, I brewed a pot of coffee and sat by the window, watching people hurry past below. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for anyone to rescue me. I didn't need Daniel or Emma or even Michael's steady presence. I had myself, my work, and the kindness of friends I'd chosen along the way. My life wasn't what I had planned, but it was honest. It was real. I wrote Chloe another letter, this one longer, telling her about my new apartment, about the basil plant on the windowsill and the cats that prowled the alley behind the hardware store. I told her I loved her, that I hoped she was happy and brave, that sometimes being strong meant starting over even when you were afraid. I tucked in a photo. Celeste had snapped it at the bakery, me in my apron, flour on my nose, grinning like a child. That weekend, a small envelope arrived at the library, addressed in Chloe's neat hand. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered with her looping script. "I miss you, Grandma. I told Mom I want to see you. I keep your card under my pillow. I'm glad you have a window for the birds." My heart cracked and healed all at once, her words a balm stronger than any medicine. At the end of February, the city thawed and Main Street filled with puddles and laughter. I celebrated my first paycheck in the new place by buying a second-hand chair from the thrift store, a plump, blue armchair that made the whole apartment feel like home. Margaret came over with a pot of stew and a deck of cards. We played rummy until midnight, the two of us laughing like schoolgirls. Some nights, I still missed Michael so much it hurt to breathe. I missed Daniel, too, and even Emma, in a complicated way. But I was learning to let go, to let the hurt live alongside the hope. My home was humble, but my heart was opening again, ready for whatever came next. And if you're still listening, wondering if you'll ever feel at home again, I hope you remember this. Sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is start over. You might not recognize your life at first, but it's yours, messy, beautiful, and more resilient than you ever imagined. Spring crept in quietly, almost shy at first. The wind softened, rain replaced snow, and the sun finally lingered long enough in the afternoons to warm the bricks of Main Street. My little studio above the hardware store filled with light. I opened the windows every morning, letting in the scent of earth and blooming daffodils from the churchyard nearby. The basil plant Celeste gave me thrived, growing bushy and fragrant on the sill. Life settled into a steady, satisfying rhythm. Mabel's was bustling again, thanks to Easter orders, hot cross buns, lemon tarts, and braided loaves. Celeste leaned on me more than ever, sometimes asking me to train new hires, sometimes trusting me to lock up at night. At the library, I shelved books and led story hour for toddlers every Saturday, their wide eyes and giggles a balm to every bruise life had left behind. Greenway's new manager, Miss Carr, had retired suddenly, leaving the job to Marcus, gave me fewer shifts, but I hardly noticed. For the first time in years, I had enough to get by. I cherished the quiet moments in my studio, the sound of rain on the window, the familiar creak of the blue armchair, the pleasure of drinking coffee in peace. Sometimes Margaret would visit, bringing homemade jam and neighborhood gossip. Sometimes Linda stopped by on her way to Sally's place, arms full of pastries and stories. My circle of friends grew slowly, gently, each kindness knitting me further into the fabric of the community. One afternoon, as I was reorganizing the children's books at the library, Mr. Lynn handed me a letter. It was addressed in Daniel's handwriting, a sight that made my hands tremble. I hurried home, the envelope clutched to my chest, and sat down by the window before opening it. "Dear Mom," it began, awkward and careful. "Chloe told me you wrote her." Emma didn't want her to write back, but she insisted. "I know I should have reached out sooner. I'm sorry things ended up the way they did." He went on to say that work was busy, that Chloe was doing well in school, that Emma had been struggling to keep the house running and was talking about selling. "I miss you," he wrote. "Chloe misses you more. Maybe we could meet for coffee sometime." Tears blurred the words, and I let them fall, feeling both the ache of what was lost and the tentative hope of something new. I wrote him back the same day. I kept it simple. "I would love to see you, Daniel. Tell me when and where. I'm working hard, but I'm happy. I hope you are too. Love, Mom." A few days later, Daniel called. His voice was uncertain, softer than I remembered. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. I arrived early, nervous as a teenager. When Daniel walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked tired, older, as if the last year had carved lines into his face. But his smile, hesitant and boyish, was the same. We talked for hours. I told him about the bakery, the library, the studio. He listened, asking careful questions. He told me about Chloe's art projects, Emma's anxieties, his own sense of being caught between the past and the present. "I didn't know how to help you, Mom," he admitted. "Emma said you wanted to leave." I believed her, and I shouldn't have. I forgave him, quietly, as mothers do. I told him I understood, how easy it is to accept the story that hurts the least, how hard it is to face what we've lost. We laughed a little, cried a little. By the time the cafe closed, something in our relationship had shifted. It wasn't what it once was, but it was real. After that, Daniel started calling every week. Sometimes Chloe joined, shy and giggly, telling me about her friends and her favorite books. Emma never spoke, but I didn't mind. I was building a new life, one in which forgiveness mattered more than old wounds. A few weeks later, Daniel told me they were putting the house on Sycamore Lane up for sale. It doesn't feel like home anymore, he said. Too many ghosts, I guess. I felt a pang, remembering every birthday, every summer afternoon in that backyard. But I let it go. I had my own home now, a place I'd fought for and built with my own 2 hands. As spring unfolded, my heart felt lighter. I planted basil and mint in pots on my windowsill. I splurged on a new pillow for the blue armchair. I started volunteering at the community center, helping with literacy classes for adults who'd never had the chance to finish school. The world had grown wider, and so had I. One Sunday, Margaret brought over a lemon cake, and we sat in the sunlit kitchen talking about old movies and new beginnings. "You've come a long way, Janet," she said. "Do you ever regret leaving?" I shook my head, smiling. No. I regret what I lost, but not what I found. If you're listening to my story and wondering if healing is possible, I want you to know, sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to let go. Let go of what was, and make room for what can be. It won't be easy. But if you keep reaching for the light, one day you'll find yourself in full bloom. May swept in with a burst of color, tulips and violets crowding the city gardens, birds weaving their songs into the morning air. With every sunrise, my little apartment above the hardware store felt more like home. I painted the walls pale yellow, brightening the space so it always looked like afternoon, even on the rainiest days. The basil and mint thrived in the sunlight. Margaret brought over a pot of marigolds, and soon I had my own small window garden, blooming just for me. Mabel's bakery was busier than ever, with wedding cakes and graduation cookies piling up. Celeste, always cheerful, made me the unofficial staff mom, confiding in me about her worries and dreams for her kids. Some days, she'd hand me a new recipe and ask for my help tweaking it. "You've got a good touch, Janet," she'd say, squeezing my hand. "You saved this place last Christmas. Don't think I've forgotten." For the first time in years, I felt irreplaceable. The library became my second haven. Mr. Lin taught me how to help with the summer reading program, and I found myself reading aloud in front of bigger groups, my voice stronger, steadier with every story. The children greeted me with hugs and artwork, their parents stopping to thank me for the patience and kindness I showed their little ones. It was strange and sweet to be needed, to be part of something that brought so much joy. On Fridays, after my shift at the bakery, I'd stop by the community center to help with literacy classes. I sat with adults of all ages, many who had never held a library card, guiding them through new words and simple stories. Their triumphs became my own. Every small step was a reason to celebrate, a grown man reading a postcard from his daughter, a grandmother writing her own name for the first time. These moments reminded me that no act of courage, no matter how small, was ever wasted. One Saturday in June, Linda and Margaret insisted on throwing me a housewarming brunch. My apartment overflowed with laughter, homemade muffins, and friends from every corner of my new life. Celeste brought a little blue teapot. Marcus arrived with a box of tools to fix my squeaky closet door. Mr. Lin brought a stack of second-hand novels. "Your reading nook needs more books," he teased, setting them by the armchair. Even some of my students from the community center stopped by, bringing cards and shy, grateful smiles. For hours, we ate, talked, and played old records on a battered player I'd found at the thrift shop. When everyone left, I looked around my tiny apartment, now full of flowers, gifts, and the lingering warmth of friendship, and realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. But the world has a way of testing your new strength just when you're learning to trust it. Late one evening, my phone rang. It was Daniel, his voice tense. "Mom, I need to ask you something. Emma and we're separating. She's moving back to her parents' place in Illinois with Chloe, at least for the summer." I didn't want to say anything until it was final, but things had been hard for a long time. There was a long pause. "I know I let you down," he said. I'm sorry for what happened last year. I should have stood up for you. I let Emma decide things for all of us. I was weak. I hope you can forgive me. I listened, my heart heavy and full. I thought of all the years I'd spent trying to hold my family together, the heartbreak of being pushed out, the way Daniel's absence had ached like a wound I thought would never close. And then I heard Chloe in the background, asking, "Is that Grandma?" Her voice cut through everything else. I smiled through tears. "Daniel, of course I forgive you," I said softly. "We all make mistakes. The only thing that matters is that we keep loving each other. Let's have Chloe come stay with me this summer, if Emma agrees. I'd love to have her help me with the bakery, the library, the garden, everything." He was quiet for a moment, relief in his voice when he finally answered. "That would be wonderful, Mom. I think Chloe needs you more than ever." "And I do too." The next weeks passed in a rush of preparation. I tidied the apartment, buying new sheets and setting up a little desk for Chloe by the window. I wrote out a list of recipes we'd bake together and picked out books to read at bedtime. I told Margaret and Linda the news, and they cheered like I'd won the lottery. When Chloe finally arrived, tall for her age, shy but excited, I knelt to hug her and whispered, "Welcome home, sweetheart." She grinned, that old spark in her eyes. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, 3 generations of my family had found their way back to each other. We spent June baking, reading, walking Main Street, and sharing our stories late into the night. I taught Chloe how to braid bread, how to grow basil from cuttings, how to listen for the tiny differences in birdsong at dawn. She taught me about courage, how to keep loving people, even after they've broken your heart. If you're listening to this and wondering whether happiness will ever find you again, take it from me, sometimes life blooms brightest after the deepest winter. Forgiveness is possible. Family can return in the most unexpected ways. And joy, true, honest joy, is waiting for you, right where you are. Summer with Chloe was like waking up from a long, gray dream into sunlight. Every morning, we made breakfast together. Chloe scrambled eggs while I sliced fresh bread from the bakery, the apartment filling with the smell of butter and basil from our little window garden. She helped me with chores, turning them into games. Who could fold laundry the fastest? Who could make the sink sparkle? I saw Daniel's playful spirit in her laugh, and traces of my younger self in the way she asked questions about everything. We fell into a gentle rhythm. On Mondays and Fridays, we worked at Mabel's bakery side by side. Chloe rolled dough with fierce concentration, her brow furrowed just like Michael's used to when he read the Sunday paper. Celeste took her under her wing, letting her decorate cupcakes for the display case. "She's got talent," Celeste told me one day, her eyes warm. "And she's a hard worker, just like her grandma." Those words wrapped around me like a hug. On Wednesdays, we volunteered at the library. Chloe loved shelving books almost as much as she loved picking out new stories for us to read at night. Mr. Lin gave her her own library card and invited her to help with the children's story hour. Watching Chloe read aloud to a circle of wiggly toddlers, I felt a pride so fierce it made my heart ache. We spent afternoons exploring Main Street, searching for the best lemonade, painting watercolors in the park, and feeding the fat pigeons that nested in the churchyard. Margaret and Linda often joined us for picnics or cards in the shade. I introduced Chloe to all my friends, weaving her into the community that had taken me in when I had nowhere else to go. But there were challenges, too. Sometimes Chloe woke up at night, missing her mother or worrying about the changes in her family. She'd curl up in my blue armchair, clutching the pillow she'd brought from home. On those nights, I held her close and told her stories about when Daniel was small, about Michael's kindness, about how love doesn't disappear just because people are far away. I promised her that families could bend without breaking, that forgiveness made you strong, not weak. Daniel visited on weekends, sometimes staying for dinner, sometimes just long enough to drop off new books or a bouquet of wildflowers for Chloe. Our conversations grew easier, less fraught with old pain. He apologized again for the lost year, for letting Emma's bitterness cloud his heart. I forgave him each time, not just for his sake, but for my own. Chloe wrote letters to her mother, telling her about her adventures, the bread she'd baked, the stories she'd read, the new friends she'd made. Emma replied now and then, short notes, a sketch of a cat, a pressed flower from Illinois. I saw how much those scraps of attention meant to Chloe, and I said a silent thank you, wishing Emma peace, even as the ache of old betrayals lingered. By late July, Chloe had found her place in the apartment. She strung fairy lights around her little desk, pasted drawings on the fridge, and taught me how to play her favorite card game. One evening, we sat on the windowsill watching the sunset, our basil plant glowing green in the fading light. "Grandma," she asked softly, "are you ever sad about not living in the big house anymore?" I thought for a long moment, searching for an honest answer. Sometimes, yes. But mostly, I'm happy now. I have you, I have friends, I have work I love. And I learned something important, that home isn't a place, Chloe. It's people. It's the way we care for each other. She nodded, leaning against my shoulder. I'm glad I'm here with you. The end of summer approached too quickly. Chloe's return to Illinois was looming, and both of us grew quieter as the days shortened. Our last week together, we made her favorite meals, took photos around town, and spent hours writing out recipes and memories in a little notebook she could take with her. On our final night, Margaret, Linda, Celeste, and Marcus joined us for dinner, toasting Chloe's courage and my second chance. That night, as I tucked her into bed, Chloe whispered, "Don't forget me, Grandma." I kissed her forehead, fighting back tears. "Never, sweetheart. You're always with me. No matter where we are." If you're listening now and you've lost someone or something you loved, I hope you'll remember, you can build new memories, new homes, new hope. Even broken things can grow strong again. And sometimes, the love you give comes back to you in ways you never expected. The morning Chloe left was bright and blue, the kind of day that made the city feel softer and full of promise. We packed her suitcase together, folding each shirt with care, sliding her little notebook of recipes and stories into the side pocket. She hugged Margaret and Linda goodbye at the bakery, promising to send postcards and photos. Celeste slipped a chocolate croissant into Chloe's bag and whispered, "Come back next summer, I'll save a spot for you in the kitchen." Mr. Lin pressed a library card into her hand, signed and dated, "So you always have a library waiting for you." Daniel arrived in the afternoon, his car humming in the parking lot below my window. He wrapped Chloe in his arms and thanked me again and again, his gratitude mixing with regret and relief. "You gave her something we couldn't," he said softly. "You reminded her what it feels like to be safe." I knelt to hug Chloe tight, breathing in her scent of sunshine and sugar and summer grass. "Write to me," I whispered. "Tell me everything. This is your home, always." She squeezed my hands, her eyes shining. "I will, Grandma. And you have to come visit me too, okay? Promise." I promised, meaning it with all my heart. As Daniel and Chloe drove away, I watched until the car turned out of sight, the weight of goodbye sitting heavy in my chest. For a moment, the apartment felt too quiet, the sun too bright. I put the kettle on, sat in the blue armchair, and let myself grieve, for the summer, for the years lost to anger and pride, for the family I once had and the new shape it had become. But as the afternoon wore on, a gentle peace settled over me. The basil and mint by the window needed watering. The bakery was expecting me in the morning. At the library, a stack of new children's books waited to be shelved. Linda would call soon, inviting me for pie and laughter. Margaret would drop by with her endless patience and a crossword puzzle. My life was full, not perfect, but real and deeply lived. A week later, a letter arrived from Chloe. The envelope was decorated with stickers, the handwriting a little neater now. Inside, She'd tucked a photo of us baking bread, flowers streaking both our faces, joy shining through every line. I told Mom all about Main Street and the basil plant and the story hour at the library, she wrote. I miss you every day. I'm saving money to come back next summer. P.S. I planted basil seeds in a cup by my window, just like you taught me. Her words bloomed inside me, proof that love had survived every storm. I pinned the photo above my desk, a bright reminder of how far I'd come. My old life on Sycamore Lane felt distant now, like a story I'd heard long ago, full of sorrow but also the seeds of everything I'd grown into. I didn't need a grand house or anyone's approval to know my worth. Sometimes, people ask how I survived losing everything. How did I forgive? How did I start over at 68, with nothing but a suitcase and a handful of friends? The answer is simple, but not easy. I decided to love anyway. I let myself accept kindness. I built new routines, gave away what I could, took help when it was offered. I learned that home is wherever you are truly seen, truly loved. If you're listening to my story, if you're standing in the ashes of what you once knew, please hear me, you are not invisible. You are not finished. There is so much life ahead of you, more kindness, more laughter, more moments of grace than you could ever count. Maybe your second chance looks nothing like your first. Maybe it's smaller, humbler, quieter. But it is yours. Tonight, I'm sitting in my yellow-painted apartment, the window open to the cool evening air, the scent of basil floating on the breeze. The pain is still there, but it's softer now, mingled with hope. I look at Chloe's photo and think of all the others out there, sons, daughters, mothers, grandmothers, who have lost and found, broken and mended, fallen and risen again. I want to hear your stories. Have you ever had to start over? Has your family changed in ways you never expected? What helped you through the hardest nights? Leave me a comment below and let's build a circle of hope together. If you felt something in my story, anger, hope, recognition, please subscribe, share this video, and send it to someone who might need it. You never know whose heart you might touch. Thank you for listening. Thank you for keeping me company through every twist and turn. Remember, the best revenge is not anger, but living well, loving well, and daring to believe that your story is not over. No matter where you are never truly alone. I'll see you next time.